Hi, this is Jason with Green Star Productions. Thanks for finding my channel, and in this video you're going to watch as I inlay a table with some resin for my mom for her birthday. She turned 65 this year, so I decided to do something nice and decorative for her. Like me, she's very craft oriented, so she likes a bigger table, but since our space is limited, I decided to do this on a TV tray. So I've chosen some designs that mean something to her. You can see the stylized Ratels or honey badgers around the edge. In the center you see a not worked cross that was something that I just came up with. And then there are the I don't know how you describe those, really, tribalized or maybe graffiti style clovers, because she's always had a knack for finding those. Now I decided, between a request of hers and then just something I always wanted to try, to give this table some expanding wings, so that if she needed more space to work on a project or something, she could just slide these on, and when she was done, she could just take them off. Now my initial thought was to use hinges on these, but I couldn't find any long enough hinges in time to get the project done, because everything I'd tried to order due to the pandemic at this point was going to take about 6 weeks for me to get, and it was going to cost me about $50 a piece for shipping. So, and decided to try something else. So as you'll see later, I decided to try something else. I just attempted to do some metal pins that would just slide in, that are on the wings themselves, that will just slide into the main body of the table. And now to catch up with the narration. Now what you see me doing here is I'm using a hole saw on a drill to just cut some round circles, because the way I'd done the design, I didn't want to just end up with blank wings. I thought, that's just going to look like crap. So I thought, all right, let's just put some pretty little colored circles on the sides, something nice and non-specific and pretty general. So here I am, just drilling them away, and I'm going to go back and even these out with my router, so that they're all nice and even. I could probably have freehanded it, but I need the router experience, so I will, as you'll see, I'll be using that later. Now I just decided to give it some visual interest. I decided to make each of the holes slightly smaller than the previous one. No real reason, I just thought it looked more interesting than just 4 dots of the same size right next to each other. As you can kind of see in the background of the video, you can see my lab assistant Brogan, who's always watching, always got his eye on me, particularly if I'm working outside. Now I gotta admit, I love doing inlay work, partly because A, it's very creative, and B, I'm not yet an experienced enough woodworker to have the tools and the experience to just cut the tabletop out myself. So in this case, I was more than happy to just use a pre-made tabletop that I got from Home Depot, and I'm just gonna put this on a TV tray's legs so that it's, again, foldable for storage. I had tried to stick with just 3 of the holes at this point, and then I realized the way I'd spaced them out, that was going to leave me with a lot of blank space on one edge. So I just went back, grabbed the smallest hole saw I had, and then just drilled another outline so I could go back and clear it out later. Here you see that this is what it looks like from above. This is just the, at this point, it's just the outlines because I wasn't gonna, obviously wasn't gonna waste a whole bunch of ink just coloring in something that was coming out. Now, since everybody knows what routing out looks like, so I've just skipped that portion of the video. And here you see me just pointing out, the different sections. And you see what I decided to do, but between my own artistic impulses and what my mom's favorite colors are, I decided, all right, well, I'll go ahead and do these in the different colors. So that changed which resins I was going to use. What you see me doing here is I'm going over the 4-leaf clovers in an emerald green resin. Now this is the UV resin. Just cures them in a little sunlight, or if you have a UV flashlight or a torch, you can cure them that way. Since it's still daylight, when I happen to be inlaying this, I used just sunlight. I could set it outside for 10 minutes, go on and do something else, catch a snack, catch a drink, catch a nap, whatever, and in 20 minutes it was going to be done. And I'm doing these small sections first, because if I want to go, when I go and do the not worked cross, it would be way too easy to fill in the clovers as well, and then I just have to go back and route those back out, and it's just more of a headache and kind of dumb. So jumping avoiding stupid mistakes like that by filling in this small section first. And that was one of the things I liked with this project. It forced me to really plan out which sections I was going to do in which order, so that I didn't end up wasting a whole bunch of resin and time having to go back and fill other things in. Because I will admit to being a pretty non-linear thinker on my best days, so I can kind of skip steps on some projects. That's one of the things that has been attracting me to doing these types of resin projects, because you have to plan this stuff out entirely from jump, particularly something as intricate as this, where you've got a whole bunch of different colors of resin right next to each other. And again, as you can see, at this point I'm not real worried about being the neatest. I'm just trying to fill the voids completely before I take it outside and let it cure, because I know I'm going to go back and sand this down again, so that'll get rid of the marker and the lines from where not the lines, the scraps and little splinters that are sticking up from where I routed out the channels for the resin. Ratel shapes, because I was still trying to find the depth collar for my Dremel, so that I could get that real tiny head in and get the sharp points I wanted on the feet and the ears, and not the ears, the tail and all that sort of thing. It's just a little easier with that smaller bit. At least that was my plan at this point. As you'll see, it turned out to be a little unnecessary, but I'm glad I did it. And I took a lot of care with somebody else's gift. I didn't just throw whatever off the top of my head. Now, here you see I've got with the leftover green resin I had, I'm just filling in the drill holes left from when I used the hole saw on the decorative rondels at the edge. I realized that I was never going to be able to get quite as sharp a bunch of edges with any router bit, so I just went back with some paint and painted the Ratels in black, decided, all right, I was just going to do the distinctive white stripe down the back, which you see I've kind of marked out here with a marker that didn't work out quite as well as I'd hoped. All right, now this is an after shot. As you see, the cross has been filled in at this point. That's with my mother's signature color, which is a teal. I do like how it shows up right next to the emerald green of the shamrocks. And in the rondels on the edge, you can see I've just filled those in with a little wood putty. I didn't want to dump a whole bunch of resin down in there. All right, skip ahead again. The rondels have been filled at this point, and just because showed it to my mom, and she said, "All right, well, can you add another little bit here that looks a little plain?" So I found this is a based on a flame design that I found on Pinterest. So now you just see me here routing those out. With my Dremel. Again, now at this one I'm just using this Dremel to do the points at the ends because those shapes are they're so small and sharp. I wanted to get them a little, I want to make sure I got them pretty exact, just for my own pernicketyness on this score. This is why of all the tools I've learned to use in the last year since I've started working with resins, what I've found is that one of the most helpful things with doing the decorative work like this is having router bits of different sizes, which of course in my case means having a couple of different routers. All right, and as you see here, we got a nice close-up shot. Finally figured out how I could raise the camera up enough so you could see it. Just going back in those sections on the painted in Ratels, I'm just cutting out a little channel along the back and the head, just trying to make it yeah, just again cutting a channel so I can pour some more colored resin in it. Just trying to make sure I get them even and looking nice. Again, I'm using the Dremel here because it gives me a nice control and gives me a real narrow effect. There, I'm going to realize that there was something that I hadn't hit the flame designs on this side, so now you see me doing that. Again, this is why I try to make sure I do all my layout work first, being a non-linear thinker. It can be great when I'm doing the design work, but when it comes to the actual execution, it does mean that I have to go back and check and make sure that I haven't skipped anything or left something undone that then I have to go back and fix. That's just annoying. I think at this point I'd kind of decided, okay, well, got that pretty well, routed out. So just gonna go. I'll just keep spinning the board and doing the final checks with the Dremel. It's like, all right, is there anything else I need to Dremel out in this section and any of that sort of stuff. Just trying to make sure that I keep my attention on what I'm doing and make sure I'm catching every bit, because again, I didn't want to go back and have to fill these things out. All right, now here I am. Since I was going to be filling these were going to be filled with lighter colored resins. I just took an old sanding pad from my big disc sander, and I'm just going through and cleaning up the edges here. I didn't want to. I didn't have a palm sander when I was going through and doing this section, or I probably would have used that. But I knew if I whipped out the big old sander, I was going to take off all of the the painted Ratel design that I'd done and all of those things, and I was trying to avoid that. So now you see me doing the hand cleanup here, and probably my favorite and most used tool of all, my air gun. And here you see I've whipped out the what is this? This is the next, basically my next biggest router. This is edge router. That's it. That's the term I'm looking for. Now at this point, having really gotten the points and all down with the Dremel, I'm just going through here and using this larger router to make sure I clean up all of the sides and get a nice clean final edge. Because since I've got, again, because I'm using a light colored resin, I didn't want to have a bunch of the splinters and all sticking up through that when I was done, that I'd have to go back and patch, or have to learn to live with just looking ugly. So instead of either of those two unpleasant options, I'm just cleaning up those sides, making sure that I've gotten all the way to the lines that I'd drawn. And again with the air gun, blow out the sawdust. And here we are back inside, and I'm getting ready to pour the next section. Now, since these are relatively shallow indentations and they're not right next to each other, I knew I could pour multiple colors at once, so I've got the white that's going to go on the back of the Ratels, the reddish brown rather, that I'm going to use for the flame design, and then just underneath that small little I don't know what you call that, really, a chevron-esque bit that's right between the bottom two legs of as it were, of the flames. I'm going to do those in a silver. Alright, you see I've set up the white. And just as I do with every other resin, when you're mixing in the pigments, just scrape the sides. That's just always a good idea whenever you're working with resin, whether you're talking about a pigmented or unpigmented batch. It's scrape the sides, scrape the sides, scrape the sides. All right, and for the red portion, I'm going to use alcohol inks. With that, I used this first one, and thought it came out a little too magenta, so I'm adding the cadmium red, to see how rich a red that's going to come up. And that looked a little too, that was a little too bright of a red, so I decided, all right, let's add some brown to just tone it down just a little bit. So I wanted some contrast, but I didn't want it to be glaring. As you see here in a minute, I just add the brown that I used is just an acrylic paint that I had sitting around, because unfortunately I don't have a brown alcohol ink. And as long as you're careful with it, you can get away with using acrylics in resin. You just have to watch how much of it you use, because it's water based and resin does not like water. See, just a couple little drops will do you. And it dulls it just enough. For the close-up, I'm going to pour the red first. as you'll notice, if you look real close, you'll see that I was getting it as close to the top as I could without really slopping over. And the only reason I was doing that is because of, again, I had the painted Ratels kind of close, and I've got that section that I'm going to be painting in silver right in the middle of that, as well as I knew I was going to be covering the whole top of it with a tabletop resin just to give it a nice smooth finish, so I wasn't too concerned about any small little gaps or ridges that were going to be left if I didn't fill the thing up entirely. Alright, and there I am pouring the next one. Yeah, sorry about this. I went over and realized, I need to do something else off camera, so I had to go handle that real quick and then came back. That's why the video is running so fast. And here you see me, dropping in the white resin on the back of the Ratel here. Nothing too exciting, just the same as ever. All right, and here you see it have an overhead shot of all everything except for the silver has been poured at this point. And that's when I realized, I forgot to mix up the silver, so I had to go back and dump some of that out. But before that, I realized, I need a little more of that white. So I added that first, just to get some sparkle in with the silver. Wasn't quite sure how the enamel paint in this case was going to show up when mixed with the resin, so I figured, all right, let's add a little sparkle with some of the white powder. Just these little tiny sections. And at this point, see, since now this is an overhead shot of the whole thing. Everything's been poured and dried out. Now this is the couple of days later. See, at this point I've given it a little sanding, so I've taken it down so that all the designs come out nice and sharp. I've gone over the Ratels again because they had come off with the sanding. Outlined the whole things in black. And at this point I'm working on attaching the wings, which I'd sawed off at this point. Now here I'm just using, you can see I'm demonstrating, these are the hinge pins that I've used to make the pegs that the wings are attached with. And if I was a better carpenter, or if I had a bigger drill press, I would have drilled these nice and straight. As you see, this turned out to be a problem for me later on. So I just drilled a couple of holes in as straight as I could get them, using pencils and geometry as best as I could manage. And I decided, all right, well, before I start monkeying around with that, I should probably finish the top. So at least I had that section done. So here I've got the centerpiece the biggest chunk. This is just sitting in a plastic wreath box that you use for storing Christmas wreaths, of course. And I'm just pouring, you've seen me pour some of the resin at this point, so now I'm off camera searching for my spatula so I can spread this around more effectively. It took me a little longer than I'd expected to find the spatula. It had ended up buried under some paints on my workbench. And here's the overhead shot. Decided to show you what it looks like from the top when I'm just scraping this around. Now, a lot of the professional woodworkers will tell you to use a notched trowel so you can get a nice even depth across this, and that would be really nice if I had one, but since I don't, I am making do with just my plastic spatula and what my eyes can tell me. Plus, again, this is with this tabletop resin, it's not quite as necessary because this is so thin. It settles itself out to a nice even depth. Just have to make sure you get it all the way down to the bottom of the sides of your piece, because when this is a liquid, it's going to flow in it's going to flow together and try to level itself out. So as long as you can get it all the way, again, cover the sides of your piece all the way to the bottom, so you don't end up with as few funny little ridges and all as you can. And then you even out the top as best you can. Make sure you got a nice even coverage. And since all of that liquid's now touching each other, it will level itself out overnight. And I just slapped the plastic cover on this and I was good to go. And here I am a day or so later. I'm test fitting the wings, which at this point you can see I've set the hinge pins in and realized, I've got them a bit too long. And I didn't really want to try drilling the mounting holes any deeper on the centerpiece here, because I was afraid I was going to end up being off a direct line, and then I'd come up right through that tabletop I'd spent so much time engraving and pouring resin on. If you look at the sides here where I've put the wings in, those are just washers that I glued over the holes just to give me something a little sturdier than the wood to hold the weight of the wings. And there you see me indicating it with my fingers. They do come up, and it does work fairly well. Set the wings aside again so I get a nice shot of the tabletop. And there's Brogan again. Now this is what the table looks like what the tray looks like when it's folded up in its storage position. And here it is, out and flat. And of course at this point I have to go back and I have to resin the wings and clean those up a little bit. And here I am again demonstrating which is demonstrating that it does line up. Now, again, it was not perfect. As you see, they kind of gapped out and all, and there's a slight gap where the saw had cut away material. I gotta be honest, I'm not real happy with this solution. My plan at this point is to go back and I'm gonna actually order those expensive hinges and latches so that I can so these can be set up and folded down when they're not in use. But for the moment, they worked, which was what I cared about and really what my mom cared about, because she was real anxious to use this table to start sorting out some of the little bits and bobs she's got kind of all mashed together. That's not bad. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the project. And once again, this is Jason with Green Star Productions. I'd like to thank you for tuning into my video. Please like if you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe if you want to see this and some of the other funny little projects I get up to and as I learn this process. If you really want to see some more of my artwork, you can follow the links to my galleries and my Etsy shop in the description below. And I hope you all have a wonderful day wherever you are. And that's a wrap.